Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be exploring evergreen content and how you can make timeless content that will bring traffic to your website over time. In this episode of the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, I wanted to explore evergreen content as an extension of the previous episode where we looked at content repurposing, because I find that the best content that you repurpose is often evergreen content and content that you can actually use throughout the year and that doesn't just have a time limit on it. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about exactly what evergreen content is, what the benefits of evergreen content is, and we'll also explore the type of content that isn't evergreen, why it's important for your SEO, and how you can actually write evergreen content that has a big impact on your SEO that you're looking for. With that said, there's a lot to cover, so let's just get straight into it. Before we get into looking at how you can create and write evergreen content that will give you the results that you're looking for out of your SEO content and content marketing efforts, we first need to establish what evergreen content is. And evergreen content is the type of content that you find that is relevant all the time and stays fresh. So in other words, it's timeless content, things like how-to guide about topics that people are always searching for. These topics might change and you can update these pieces of content as new trends emerge, but generally speaking, most people will be looking for the trendiness that you may find in other types of content, that's say on vertical video content where a lot of it is just trends. This is timeless content that people can use and come back to time and time again. And the reason why evergreen content is called evergreen is because it's a metaphor for evergreen trees, which not only are they used and recycled every year as Christmas trees, but they keep their leaves and are sustainable throughout the year. So this is essentially a metaphor for longevity and timelessness that makes evergreen content what it is. So this type of content is important because it allows you to increase your website traffic over time while also having the ability to update and recycle your content to be more relevant as your industry changes. And that can lead on to content repurposing, which we'll speak about later. You'll notice a theme with these type of content formats that they tend to be longer form, because a topic like a relevant industry trend that may only require like a short form piece, like 500 to 800 words to actually cover properly, it's going to take you a while to actually explain the content in depth for a lot of the topics that are considered evergreen. That's something to consider, and why it's so important to have a plan moving forward when you're actually thinking about the type of evergreen content that you want to create. Because from my experience, evergreen content takes a lot of time and a lot of research, and you really need to consider SEO if you really want to get the benefits from it. So implement that into your content strategy. Think about ways that you can use and leverage evergreen content whilst also ensuring that you're staying relevant and creating content that lets your customers know that you are aware of the trends and you're not just sat in this time period where something that once was relevant isn't relevant anymore. So that's really important too. And the last note I wanted to make before we move on to the next bit of the podcast is that not all evergreen content is the same. And what I mean by this is that some topics will have more staying powers than other topics, but it's up to you to determine which content you think would be worth the investment and whether it would be relevant to your audience and if that is something that really should be on your website. So now that we understand what evergreen content is, let's look at what evergreen content isn't. And to give you a very brief overview of this, any content that is timely is not evergreen content. So I'm talking about things like news articles, product announcements, seasonal content, or content that covers any trends that eventually die. So for example, 2 or 3 years ago, you could have argued that a lot lot of social media managers covering TikTok, and TikTok trends might have actually not been an evergreen topic. But because we know that TikTok has that staying power and a lot of people are leveraging it to grow their businesses, we know that this topic is actually relevant. And half the success on TikTok is actually understanding just how the trends work and what the culture is over there. So distinguish what type of content you will make and whether it will be evergreen or not. I think it's important to have a bit of both. I think that you need to make sure that you're appealing to the times whilst also answering those fundamental questions that ultimately your audience is going to want. And also for things like if you've got any launches coming up or it's the holiday season and you want to run a sale, you might want to do some Christmas, not fluff content, but more lifestyle content that doesn't necessarily have the same bite to it as, say, like a how-to guide or a SaaS business who's exploring how to do cybersecurity, something that is really fundamental to the security of a business's online presence and internal systems. So it's just things like that. You've got to allow yourself to have the agility to actually move around. Evergreen content is really important for your SEO efforts as a whole because you'll be able to generate a sustainable amount of traffic over time. And because SEO is quite a long game and can take you several months to actually start ranking for a keyword, and there's also no guarantee of ranking on the first page of Google, then it's really good to start building those timeless pieces of content that will really help kickstart your SEO efforts. And they'll also help elevate your image and present your brand as an authority, especially if it's an industry where a lot of the evergreen topics that you'll be covering are very technical. So especially again for cybersecurity, or if you're a SaaS business and you're appealing to people in finance, so fintech, a lot of those topics, they're going to be quite in depth and they're going to cover things that your audience might not actually know, which is the reason why they're searching for it. And because of that, you need to make sure that you're hitting all those key points. And whilst you're writing content, you need to remember that your keywords are going to be crucial for success here. That is, I don't want to say it's the whole point of it, but it is a very big point of why you would want to invest the time in making. And I'd actually recommend a lot of the evergreen pieces of content that you make, especially if it's like a guide, for example, to be over 3,000 words. I found that that's the correct length to be able to explore a topic in depth and also use a high keyword frequency without keyword stuffing, which is a big problem. And if Google identifies that you're stuffing your content with keywords, then they will penalize your content. So it's really good to make sure that you invest the time in your monthly content efforts to be able to do that. Even if you're a small business owner, this may seem really daunting, but once you start to have a process for creating this content, it does become a lot easier. And also, the more you do it, the better you'll get at researching keywords that you know works. I'd recommend starting out with long tail, low competition keywords when you're a small business owner. I wouldn't necessarily focus too much on the amount of traffic volume that a certain keyword gets each month. I think what's important is that you start ranking, and then once your content is on the first page, people who do click your evergreen content will actually have a very strong search intent. They'll be wanting to do something, and they might actually be further down the sales funnel. They'll be in the awareness stage in the sense that they're just discovering your brand, but they're already closer to actually making a purchase. They just need that information to help them move along. And another effective way to increase your SEO efforts and to help search engines really understand what your content and what your website is all about is to create pillar pages. And I've had quite a lot of experience with creating pillar pages and thinking of creating pillar pages for a new website that I'm working on for the Megan Taylor Creative website. I'm currently going through a transfer where I'm swapping from one website host to another. And the reason for that is because I feel like the content on the previous website, it was serving my audience, but I don't think it really showed enough about what it is that we do. A lot of it was based around content, but there were also a lot of small business owner tips, which one of my customer avatars is a small business owner looking to transition into making a full-time living out of their small business. So I know that I need to do that. But then on the flip side of that, I also have a digital agency owner as one of my customer avatars, and I need to be able to correctly categorize all that content to better suit the audience. And pillar pages allow you to basically have one central topic, and you can have bits of highly optimized text that allow the audience to understand where to navigate the website, but also help search engines index your pages a bit better. And linking is also very important, and linking, but more importantly, linking with intent is very important. You need to think about the quality of your links, and if you create a pillar page that has the sole purpose of linking people to other content on your website, then you will be thinking very carefully about what that page looks like and what links should go where. So that's a really useful exercise. I want to clarify that a pillar page is not a landing page. From my experience, landing pages, whilst they do obviously contain links, landing pages are driven by SEO, but in a different way. The sole purpose of a pillar page is to essentially contain links and help with user navigation around your site to find relevant content. A landing page normally is driven by one specific goal, and that goal is a conversion. So whether you want your customer to inquire about a subject, or if it's an e-commerce site, you might want the customer to actually make the purchase there and then, especially if you're offering low ticket products that you can sell a lot easier than a lot of the high ticket B2B products that some of the technology companies, for example, are selling. I was actually working with a client whilst working at another agency, and we were developing a series of landing pages for them. And the problem was that this was a new client who didn't have much content. So I think the project turned into something a bit different than we had initially intended. And I think that the client actually wanted a landing page where we would explain what they do. There was a hero header and things like that. And then at the bottom, there would be the call to action. And the call to action, because it was an e-commerce site, would be to actually go and explore their shop. It wouldn't necessarily be buy this specific wine here. They were a wine brand. It would be look at our shop, look at this specific range, because they had different ranges. And so a couple of the concepts we came up with, one of them was a pillar page for each wine varietal. Another one was a page for each range, because their ranges were very unique and quirky, and they were all about sustainability, and each range had a different art piece with a different animal on it. So it was all very lovely and very appealing. So we could make that very attractive. And then we also wanted to have a page about sustainability and the brand's work with charity. Luckily, we did have a few pieces of content about that, but even so, I think the whole point of their brand in essence was that for every bottle made, they would donate so much to a certain charity. So they were actually more interested in driving those conversions straight away than actually using that content. The bulk of the content on the site was essentially the product pages and product descriptions, so it didn't necessarily make sense to have a pillar page at the beginning. Whereas for someone like me or another client who, say for example, they also deal with sustainability, but they're in the alternative protein sector, where they have a lot of different news articles that go out every week, and that's the bulk of their content. They can actually have different pillar pages because there's so much content, but some of it, there's lots of different topics within that key topic, and it's quite easy for them to distinguish the concrete topics that people will always be looking for, especially as they host really big events, and there are key topics, some of which are a bit more relevant right now, and some of which are the wider issues that will be with us for quite a while in that field. And I find that when you have a lot of content like that, that's when you really need a pillar page, and you need to make sure that that page is incredibly user friendly and that the links really show up, and you have like a really nice underline, and people are actually enticed to click on things, because otherwise the pillar page will not be as effective as you wanted it to be. So the last thing that I really wanted to talk about today was just how to actually write evergreen content, but also whether you always need to make evergreen content. I think that there's a lot of pressure to make evergreen content because people are under the impression that they need to in order to generate the traffic that they want over time. But the truth is that not everyone needs evergreen content. I find that it's good to have the mix. And again, I refer to the 80/20 or the 60/30 rule. The bulk of your content is evergreen, but then there's 20% where you can plan it by year and you have that research and you follow relevant hashtags in the industry so that you can stay up to date with news and then make content and respond to certain hot topics in the industry. This is especially important on social media. Obviously, it's the same with SEO content as well. Obviously, a keyword might actually have more volume over time, and because the more in demand keyword is, essentially the easier it is to start ranking for it. But then over time, that traction with that keyword will go down. People will stop searching for it. So because of that, it's not worth necessarily pushing that kind of content out all the time. And you want to keep it much shorter than those big long pieces that are the definitive of whatever your industry is. And to kind of write evergreen content, you really need to choose the right keywords and you need to do all the things to make sure that your content is optimized for SEO. That includes having meta descriptions, having titles that have your primary and secondary keyword and things like that. And you want to make sure that your images have alt text in them. Just very simple things, but things that can be very effective too. And you also want to think about accessibility as well. This isn't necessarily related to SEO, but I think that when you're writing content that a wider pool of people will be searching for, it's really important to think about the different ranges of people that might come to that website. And with this, the thing to think about the most is how accessible your writing actually is. I would use Hemingway's editor to keep track of what grade your writing is, and a grade essentially means the reading level. So grade 8 to 9 is normally really good, and anything beyond that, there's normally really long complex subjects and a lot of jargon which you can use in evergreen content, but I recommend if you are going to use it sparingly and explain it first so that the audience has a good grasp on the topic, because at the end of the day that person wants to know about that jargon, but you don't want to throw it in their face as well. And you also want to make your content scannable too, because people are kind of be jumping around and coming in from lots of different places, because when they type in their search, Google will just take them straight to the bit in the text that's highlighted that has the answer to their question. So you want to make sure that there's normally a heading and an image, and then if they want to scroll up or scroll down, then they can. And the fact that lots of people will just scroll and scan, it's also a good idea to have a conclusion that explains the key points in more detail. So yeah, that's it. That's everything today. I really hope you enjoyed this rambly episode. It's been a lot of fun to talk about a topic that is, I think, on a lot of people's radar, especially us people who write a lot of SEO content. And I think the thing to remember is that evergreen content is going to be the bulk of your website. And over time, the more you build this up, the more you can start updating it every year and the more you can start repurposing it. And what we spoke about with content repurposing last week, a lot of that content that you're going to want to repurpose is evergreen content to make sure that the content is relevant and up to date. And that is especially true if there are any major changes in your industry. So yeah, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on YouTube and like the video. And as always, I will speak to you next week. Bye.